Good morning. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. You can also find us all over social media by looking up the Constitutionalist podcast. Total pivot today. Was supposed to have an angel mom on. I believe that's an important story, but things just didn't work out last minute. So instead, you're going to hear some of my thoughts on a speech that I gave before a group not too long ago about the culture war, about what's happening. But before I get there, anybody watch Biden's speech last night? Now, I didn't watch all of it. I just worked a crazy number of hours down in LA, and I got home late after a meeting, conservative group meeting last night. But the one thing that I caught was, how angry is that man? How angry? Well, I think I'd be angry too if I was the duly voted for, I won't say duly elected, real candidate, and then the Democratic Party decided, well, you can't win. We won't actually kick you out as president. Now, if they'd kicked him out as president, using the 25th Amendment because he was incompetent, at least I'd understand. But no, he gets to be president, but he's not capable of running for another term. Now, that doesn't make any sense. So now we got Kamala running for president, along with communist tampon Tim Walz. And the combo of them, they never received a single vote. Yet they're still talking about democracy and how Trump's going to take it away. And yet, what did they do? Or how they're going to fix everything on day one. Wait a minute. I remember Kamala Harris giving all kinds of speeches that said, I back Joe. Now, she had to have known, right? She couldn't be incompetent enough to not know that the man has some serious mental issues. Yet she covered for it. And now she's saying, on day one, we're going to fix it. She's talking about price controls. You know, like they have in communist countries. She's talking about crazy high tax rates so nobody can get ahead. She's floated a wealth tax. Now, she was nice enough to steal Trump's good idea about no tax on tips. I'll give her credit for that. She absolutely saw a good idea, and in order to get elected, she was willing to steal Trump's idea. Good for her. I wonder if she could maybe jump in on the idea of, we should have less regulation. I'd be okay if she was to steal all of Trump's policies. Except it wouldn't be real, would it? It's all smoke and mirrors from the Democratic Party. Again, the party that talks about democracy, the party that, you have the right to protest. What's happening at their convention right now? You got protesters lining up, some of them trying to climb fences. Magically, they realized the fences needed to be farther away from the building than 1,500 feet. Well, why is that significant? Well, somebody in the Biden administration didn't think it was, particularly the Secret Service, didn't think it was important enough to secure a building that wasn't that far away. And Trump ended up getting shot. The obvious spot. I'm not even trained. And it's obvious. I'd go, oh, yeah, if I was a shooter, that's the spot I'd want to be in. But the DNC decided, we need to keep these protesters. By the way, protesters from the left primarily that are threatening violence. And rather than let that violence get out of control, like Tampon Tim, the vice president nominee for the Democratic Party, unlike what he did in Minneapolis, where he let it burn, Milwaukee, where he let it burn, all over his state where he let it burn, now they got cops with batons and riot gear showing up before the protesters even get over that fence. Kind of interesting. Kind of interesting. Why would you do that? Well, because they tell us one thing, and when it fits their narrative, they're willing to let the nation burn. But when it doesn't fit their narrative, they do actually want law and order. I think most people do actually want law and order. But if they're willing to go wherever the wind blows that's most favorable for them, can you count on them when it's down? No, I would contend you absolutely cannot count on them. You can't believe what they say. So a lot of people are getting tired. I'm going to start with a quote from one of the founding fathers, one of the ones that's a little less famous, George Mason, though he's kind of thought of as the person who wrote the Bill of Rights, meaning the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. You know, First Amendment, freedom of speech; Second Amendment, gun rights; Third Amendment, not hopefully never relevant again, about quartering soldiers and forcing people to put soldiers up in their house for indefinite periods of time. We could continue that, but you get my point. First 10 amendments in the Constitution. No free government, nor the blessings of liberty, can be preserved to any free people, but by a frequent reoccurrence to fundamental principles. Meaning you have to go back and understand who you are. Learn about who you are, so you take those lessons from the past so that you can maintain what is great about this country. I think that's kind of been forgotten, which really, it bothers me, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to take up our civic duty, learn our rights. Some people know, and frankly, a lot more of them know now than in 2020. There's more people awake. I do believe there's hope. I do believe that the culture is shifting, and that I'm going to point out a bunch of culture wins. So if we return to the principles of the Constitution, okay, we have this great foundation. A lot of people I know see, oh, well, the country's going to HEW hockey sticks, and everything's bad. Well, if I was to make even a little effort, I could find a whole lot of things that piss me off that aren't okay. Or I can see the glass is half full. We're going to focus on more the glass is half full today. And remember, politics is downstream from culture. Culture, essentially, it creates what is the norm, what's accepted, what's cool. Well, culture has been, let's see, we should be unaccountable. It's my truth, there is no the truth. And I get there's a lot of stuff where there's gray area, but there's no the truth, according to the communists. It's my truth. Meaning, if I have a different opinion than you, and even if how I came to those conclusions is in no way, shape, or form based upon facts, because facts don't matter. It's just, well, how I feel about it. Then why should there be consequences? Why do you think they wanted no cash bail? Why do you think they were okay with people burning down cities? Why do you think they were okay with the government lying to you and telling you that masks work until finally they had to admit that masks don't work? Why do you think they were okay with, well, you have to get the shot even though it's experimental and we really don't know what's happening with that shot? And yet AstraZeneca's now gone, pulled from the market, one of the major shot manufacturers, meaning, you know, that shot thing that you get in your arm that has to do with that disease that we had that started in 2020. Okay, it's all because we were unaccountable because government was unaccountable. They can do whatever you want because it was acceptable to the average person to not speak out, whether it was because of fear, because they were asleep. Doesn't matter which one. We have to speak out. That's one of the things that makes the Americans unique, is that we speak up. So, one of the places I'm going to look is beyond our shores. We have inspired the world to what freedom is. Now, most of those countries haven't got there. they're in a different form of government. Their rights are not as strongly enshrined. Or they're like communist nations, like if the Soviet Union, you look at their constitution when they were still a country. You read it and you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Except people actually did not have the right to speak up, and they did not have the right to defend themselves with weapons. Second Amendment. So, in effect, if you spoke up in the former Soviet Union, you disappeared. In the current China regime, if you spoke up, you disappeared. So, there's some bad examples, but as we look around the world, there's also some great examples. One of my very favorites, we're going to start with my favorite, is in Argentina. They elected the Argentinian, more libertarian, but Argentinian Trump. Within Malay, I believe is his last name. He started firing people in the government because they'd had 30%, mind you folks, 30% inflation every year. So dramatically worse than us. He fired a whole bunch of people in the government that he thought were not useful, that were not doing any job that mattered. It was a bloated government, much like California. And within months, inflation dropped to, drum roll, 0. They have 0% inflation. Now, he had to do some dramatic things to get us there, but good government and adhering to these principles, these conservative principles, changed Argentina. And freedom has risen from there. Another place, the Netherlands. The EU, along with the globalists, along with the World Economic Forum, that believes you shouldn't have rights, no free speech. They're right there with the Democrats, right there with a party that was in Germany that they didn't want you to have free speech. In the 30s and 40s, there was a party in Germany. I can't think of who they were. Maybe it'll occur to you. It's just not coming to me. Well, the Democrats, the globalists, and that party in Germany, they all didn't want you to have free speech. They all think they know better. They all believe that they need to manage your life because you can't handle it yourself. So there wasn't freedom. Well, in the Netherlands, that World Economic Forum decided, because of global warming, fake global warming, because plants seem to be doing better with all this carbon, which doesn't make any sense, right? Or there's been times when we look at the history, things have been hotter or colder, and they're saying it's all man-made. And I would say there's a lot of scientists that don't agree with that. And the fact that they're saying science is the consensus, and that determines science, is in of itself not science. So, globalists decided, because of global warming, that Netherlands, one of the most productive farmland countries in the world, they needed to shut down a bunch of their farms. They needed to stop using fertilizer. They needed to get rid of their dairies. And the farmers went, oh no, you're not taking our land, kicking us off of it. Here they are, they're doing something amazing. They have per acre productivity levels that are pretty much unseen in human history. Those farmers went, no. Well, with the no, they formed their own political party. That political party then proceeded to do things like protest the government, particularly the farmers. But farmers are a small percentage in the Netherlands, just like they are everywhere. Those farmers got their tractors and blocked traffic. Not one tractor, not 50 tractors, not 100 tractors, thousands of tractors. When the government, the parliamentary government of the Netherlands decided, oh, well, we're not going to do that. We're not going to bend our knee. They did things that I thought were hilarious. Like, you have these big tanks that you fill with cow sewage. And they went to some government buildings, and those tanks are connected to a pump that shoots it out just like your hose, except it's full of sewage, and they sprayed down some of the government buildings. So they fought back against a tyrannical government. That's a big deal. But the bigger deal is their organization, they got other people, regular, everyday, ordinary Dutch people, to vote for them. They became the largest party there. It's not clear whether their new prime minister is going to be Geert Wilders, but their party is in control of parliament because they had enough. So other places around the world are becoming more nationalist populist, that they're embracing the idea that each country is unique and special. Each country needs to be patriotic, because if you're not patriotic, you will not defend the things that make your nation unique and special. So it's a nationalist populist movement that has moved beyond our country. I believe that Trump embodies that nationalist, populist, hence America first, folks, movement. Well, that's not the only place. It's not like there's two isolated places around the world. All over Europe. In France, the nationalist populist movement led by Marie Le Pen, they won the most seats in parliament. Now, a bunch of stuff happened and they're not in control of parliament, but they shifted hugely. France was unquestionably a socialist country and had some communist tendencies, and it's taken a major step away from that. Spain, same thing. Poland, they want no part of it. Hungary with Viktor Orban, nationalist populist. Sweden went its own way. That's cool. They've moved away from those socialist policies. They've decided, just like the U.S., that they can't have people invading their country called illegal aliens because it shifts the culture. People need to come the right way to a country. They need to respect the values and respect the things that make that country unique, and rather than come here and demand that we do something different. Germany, especially Eastern Germany, the number one party is a nationalist populist party, and it's the number two party in the entire country. That's a big deal. So, around the world, things are shifting. And for me, that's a great big deal. Coming back here, though, culture shifts. You know the Squad? You know, those hardcore leftists, borderline communists, authoritarians that like to talk about freedom but want to shut you up if you dare to have a different opinion. They're all young. They're all very woke. They're led by AOC and Ilhan Omar. And two of them just lost their primaries. That's huge. That's a culture shift. That people did not want their woke, ridiculous approach to being a congressperson. So, the guy who pulled the fire alarm to stop a vote, that's Jamal Bowman out of New York, right in the heart of a super liberal area. He's gone. And Cori Bush out of Missouri, I believe St. Louis, which is one of the liberal areas of Missouri. She's gone. They both lost in primaries to reasonable Democrats. Now, we'll see how reasonable they are, because that's kind of an oxymoron to me. I think that the Democrats have ever lost their minds. So the idea that there's some reasonable Democrats at a national level, I have my doubts. But how about ones that aren't as woke and as ridiculous? I'm sure that's the case. We're going to go ahead and go to break. I want to say thank you to everybody for listening, on whether it's on the radio, local here or around Fresno and Clovis, So right in the heart of California, or it's the people that find me on social media. I appreciate it. I do this because I believe in my message and my cause, but I know that without you, I couldn't make a difference. I'm trying to influence hearts and minds. I'm trying to fix this country. I'm trying to return us to constitutional Christian principles. So thank you. Let's go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. So some other places where culture's shifted. And I'm giving some examples of where culture shifted with politics, but I will get to some other types of examples. So San Francisco removed a DA that was woke, that refused to make criminals accountable at all. California has a proposition that is going to remove this whole idea that criminals can go steal $950 worth of stuff as many times as they want in a day, and each time's a misdemeanor. It's not even cumulative. That's state law. That's what happened under greasy Gavin Newsom. You know, he's a used car salesman. He'll tell you anything. Folks, you never want him near power. I live under the tyranny of Gavin Newsom. Thank goodness we still have First and Second Amendment rights, but they're doing everything they can get away with to run anybody that doesn't agree with them out of the state. It's not just that we live in a vacuum, but people are having enough. They've had enough. In San Francisco, one of the most liberal places in the entire country, they got rid of a DA because that DA would not essentially prosecute cases. Same kind of things happen in New York and other liberal places where George Soros bought that position. In addition, San Francisco got rid of 3 school board members during COVID because the school board members were concerned with changing names of schools, not with educating kids. Their priorities were completely backwards. Los Angeles has tried twice, and they came closer the second time to get rid of their DA in Gascon. They're trying to get rid of him a third time because people have had enough. I don't know if they'll succeed, but big deal. Oregon. You know, liberal Oregon. Now, it's probably not quite as crazy outside of Portland as California is on average, but just like California, all the rural areas, they're pretty red. Oregon, all the rural areas are pretty red. Those people have had enough, and now just about 20 of their counties have voted to be part of Greater Idaho. Now, I don't know what's actually going to happen with that, but they so hate the politics that are coming through Eugene and Portland, because those are the power, that's where the population is in Oregon. And Medford, there's 3. They've so had enough, they want to leave the state and join Idaho. But even with those liberal centers, Oregon just elected a tough-on-crime attorney general. Former Republican, changed to independent, because they still can't vote for a Republican, but they changed to independent. And they elected a tough-on-crime, conservative attorney general. That's a huge shift. The country, I believe, is ready for change. Now, getting back to, so culture. So if we look at comedians, artists, things like that. During the early part of the Biden administration, Hunter Biden became this great artist. Now, I think that was all smoke and mirrors, and the fact that, his art's sort of okay, but paying real money for it's just, you got to be kidding me. So I looked at that art and I'm like, no way. Comedians, though, started making fun of the art. They started making fun of Joe Biden. They make fun of Kamala Harris. We have several people that impersonate Kamala Harris and make fun of her constantly. And it's hilarious, folks. If you haven't seen it, please check in. Now, none of these women that are impersonating her look exactly like her, but their voices are so dead on. And they have perfected how to speak in word salad. You know, there's different dialects. Some people, they kind of speak Southern. I kind of, speak like a Californian. Well, we've now got a new American English dialect called the word salad, where you say a bunch of words, but you don't actually say anything. So Kamala Harris has actually contributed to our culture. I'm not sure it's in a good way, but she has contributed. Newspapers, they've had to lay off huge numbers of people because people are consuming news in a different way. So the old media is dying, but it's not just newspapers. The influence of the New York Times is shifting, so is the Wall Street Journal. So I'd say one is hard left, New York Times, and one is kind of moderate mainstream neocon Republican opinion. My dad won't like that. And there's a rise of new media, podcasters, new stations, new ways of getting your news, whether it's through social media. CNN, at its peak, had millions of viewers a day. And now they're down, something like 50% since their peak, when they were all about attacking Trump day and night. Well, they still do that, but people have tuned out because they're tired of hearing it. They don't ever talk about anything. They're a news channel. Does the world revolve around Trump? Well, if you're at CNN, yes, because you realize that everything is either like, let's see, my hair grew and I need a haircut. It's Trump's fault, or it's global warming's fault. Oh, I got a hangnail. It's Trump's fault. Oh, I got a flat tire. Well, clearly Trump conspired and it's Trump's fault. That's how ridiculous they are. MSNBC or MSDNC. I think they should just go ahead and make the name change. Their numbers are hugely down. They're down almost 90% from their peak. Wow. So people are no longer trusting the news. I see that as a big deal. That's a culture shift. Or they don't trust traditional news. Now, some people, their response was to tune out. Well, when you tune out, there are still people that are going to make the decision. So all those that don't vote, you're in effect voting for whatever the majority wants, and you're not making your voice heard. And local matters. There are all kinds of ways to get involved. There's all kinds of places to look to find help to figure out which candidates are worth your vote. Which candidates you can believe in. Which candidates are real people. Frankly, I would rather have somebody that I disagree with some that are real people. Now, ideally, I want the whole package, but that's not how politics work. And politics are essentially the rules and the way that we set up what we're then going to do, how we're going to implement policy. So who you vote for matters. There's also this arrival of new, what I call freedom platforms, where there's actually free speech. There's two of the biggest ones are Rumble. Now, it's still small compared to YouTube, but when it started, it was less than 0.25% of YouTube as far as total numbers. And now it's like 3 or 4%. It's right in that range. That's huge. And then the bigger one is X, formerly Twitter. Matter of fact, X is so worrying some of the world, some of the establishment, not just here, but across the pond in Western Europe, that England had just had the nerve to threaten that if we posted memes that they didn't like, that they were going to send people over and arrest them. And I'm thinking, well, we got a Second Amendment right. And if you think you're going to arrest me for following the rules of both Twitter, because it's a private organization or private company, and what my established rights by my government are, bring it on. Just bring it on. It won't go well for you. Do you know that there are several times more guns in the United States than there are people? And not everybody has a gun. That means some people have like 2 or 3. Now, are we as well trained as soldiers? No, but politicians should shudder at the thought that if it comes to civil war, it's going to be terrible. Maybe we should try to be reasonable and respect people's rights, whether even people on the left. Respect people's rights. You know, the woke movement has convinced the left that the right is going to take away trans movement rights. Now, the only place I would say they might technically be right is we, the right, wants to stop women in sports. Oh, wait, we want women in sports. We don't want fake women in sports. You know, pretend women competing against real women. The other one is, well, we don't want children transitioning because we don't know the long-term implications, whether it's chemically transitioning or surgeries. Once you're 18, while I'll think there's something wrong with you and it's creepy, you have the right, but to do it to kids, I can't quite say, or I'm not willing to use the 4-letter words that would be appropriate. Now, why is that a cultural win? Because the left pushed so far that finally people woke up and went, wait, my daughter can't use a gymnasium locker room without men being there? And we spent all this time trying to empower women, and now the left has decided to erase women? That's huge. Or we want to transition kids. Well, most people are like, that's just wrong. Because we don't know. We know that if they get the surgery, whether you add or you cut away, you have to be on anti-rejection chemicals, much like somebody that gets a transplant of like kidneys. You have to be on those chemicals for life. You can't have kids. It's insane. So those new freedom platforms, that's a big deal. And I'm on those, and I'm making my opinion heard. Pretty small on X, have a moderate following on Facebook, have a moderate following on Instagram, have a tiny following on Truth Social. Well, it's better than tiny, but it's still fairly small, and almost no blueprint on Telegram. Getting to companies where things are shifting. A whole lot of companies are deciding that they don't want diversity, equity, and inclusion czars to come in and screw up their company because they want to hire the most qualified people, not the people with the right skin color. Now, if you're poor, here's the one place where I would be okay with trying to give advantage and having the government play a little bit. If you're poor, not your skin color, how poor are you? If you were really poor and we found ways to help through the government to pull you up out of poverty, to give you a hand up, not a handout, so you had to earn it, but here's this opportunity, here's a scholarship, here's things like that, I'd be okay with it. But if we make it on skin color, we never achieve Martin Luther King's dream. So companies are getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's a big deal. Companies have stepped over the line, like Target decided to step in on the trans issue and make tuck-friendly bathing suits for little kids that don't know any better. They're not letting little kids be little kids. It's little kids, little boys need to tuck their junk in a bathing suit? No, that's parents living out some fantasy because they want to be approved by the woke. So Target did that. Target was essentially targeting your kids. They were essentially LGBTQing your kids. And Target took about a $2 billion loss. Another company that decided to abandon their customer base, Bud Light. And Dylan Mulvaney. And they had Dylan Mulvaney in a bathtub acting like a really not bright woman. So here's a pretend woman portraying women as not bright whatsoever. It wasn't funny. I thought it was just rude and insulting. And it did not reflect the values of the average Bud Light customer. And they had lost billions. They were the number one beer company for a lot of years. Now they're number 3, and they're not doing well. Amen. That's culture shifting. Harley recently decided to jump all in and sponsor Drag Queen Story Hour. Now, why would you need a Drag Queen Story Hour? Oh, because you want to indoctrinate kids. Well, Harley, isn't the motorcycle company. Those guys are pretty tough guys, pretty conservative guys, and their CEO, who they hired, was woke and decided, no, we need to fund all of these LGBTQ issues. Well, they paid the consequence because at Sturgis, the largest motorcycle rally or event in the country that happens every year, they have a Harley booth, and almost nobody was in it. Well, Harley has now broken and apologized. They haven't fired the CEO yet, so I don't think it's done, and I don't think they need to be forgiven yet. They need to fire him. So Harley bent the knee. Harley backed off. Harley apologized again. I don't think it's enough. Another one that actually did essentially the same thing through their CEO, Tractor Supply. Tractor Supply, again, Drag Queen Story Hour, sponsored Pride parades. Those parades, and I've been to a Pride parade in Fresno where men were completely naked and there were kids there. At a public event, not okay. I was there, went to one, and there were men and women, and they were all in bondage outfits, and some of them were on leashes and wearing dog face stuff. I don't know. Again, you want to do that in your private bedroom? Okay. You want to go do that and parade along to show kids? What's wrong with you creeps? Okay, so Tractor Supply did things like that. They sponsored a pride parade. And their customers had a fit. And they fired somebody. They completely apologized. And they changed their behavior. That didn't used to happen. We used to just roll over. Now when we see a company that is behaving in a way that is completely out of line, we have to speak up. Disney. Now, it just pains me because I like superhero movies. But they've made a lot of bad Marvel superhero movies. I'm not saying all of them are bad, but they've made a lot of bad ones. Because they were more concerned with being woke than following the storyline that's already written down in the comics. Disney has lost in the last 2 years over $2 billion because they're bound and determined to be woke. That's a problem. But on the other side of that, you have people arising because the marketplace wants something different. So you got somebody like Angel Studios. They bought from Disney, because Disney had bought out a company, Sound of Freedom. The film about human trafficking around the world and how it frequently comes here. Well, that problem didn't disappear. That's a real problem. It's based on a real guy. That movie was absolutely a blockbuster. It cost nothing to make. The reason it resonated was because it was a real story about real people and about a real issue in our society. Well, we need things like that. We need alternate media. We're going to go ahead and take our last break. Well, folks, I sure thank you for this time. As you know, I'm going to try to keep this positive. There's so much to complain about. Sometimes I veer over into that negative, but we're trying to keep the glass half full today. Let's go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. And we're talking about cultural shifts. What's happening? Well, Hollywood's going broke. Did you know that there is now a conservative actor's guide? Even my producer's looking at me like, what? Yes, there is a conservative actor's guide. Now, there was always a few standouts, but now they've actually gotten organized. Do you know that?
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Surprising.
It is surprising. But Hollywood, Ronald Reagan was the head of the actor's guide back in that would probably be in
the Actors Guild, right?
Guild. I'm saying guide, guild.
Yes.
He was president.
Yeah, there's a few out there. There's Rob Schneider was actually on Tucker. Mm-hmm. He's a conservative. Adam Sandler, John Voight,
Kelsey Grammer.
Oh, really? That's right. That's right. Frasier.
And Gina Carano of Star Wars.
Yes. Well, formerly. Yeah, she was canceled. Mm-hmm. And then who's the one that I'm forgetting their name? It'll come to me. But there's still out there, a handful out there. And they're refusing to be canceled. That's what I admire about them. Mm-hmm. They're not backing down. Some are not getting those jobs, but hey, more power to them.
Mm-hmm. So things are shifting there. There's also a parallel economy that's arising. Stop giving your money to companies that hate you, or at least hate your values. So you can go to the paralleleconomy.com. That's one place to go. That's one of the big ones, Public Square. All you have to do is find places to spend your money that you're going to spend anyway. And give that money to people that respect your values, that respect freedom, that want freedom. For that matter, it's not just your everyday money, but your retirement money. You know that BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, they're all for DEI. So when you give your money to them, your retirement money, they're doing things with it that are not always in your best interest. So there's ways to get around. Vivek Ramaswamy recently set up a non-woke investment company, and there are others. It's just a matter of going out and finding them.
The new AI too from Elon Musk. Have you tried that yet?
I have not tried it yet.
Yeah, I've been playing with it. It actually does pretty good. And the left is screaming at him like this is going to end like the political everything that we know about currently. I don't know. They had ChatGPT forever.
Yeah. I thought this was an interesting little tidbit from Forbes magazine. No conservatives. I'd say they're kind of center left. They're not the worst one out there, and they also have a news service. 82% of consumers say they will shop with their values. Now, that includes liberals, but 82%, there's lines that companies couldn't cross. 3/4 of those, so let's call that 60% of people, will go elsewhere. And companies do respond when you go elsewhere. That's a huge deal. It's just a matter of going elsewhere. There's some things that have to do with youth, some shifts that are huge. Now, girls are still pretty darn liberal and pretty much see themselves as Democrats. But boys are shifting. And they're shifting quite a lot. So in 2013, 38% of young men said they leaned Republican, leaned conservative. In 2018, that number was up to 42% lean Republican, lean conservative. In 2023, here's where all of a sudden it starts to mean something. 49% say they lean Republican or lean conservative. 49%. Now, keep in mind, most kids probably don't have a lot of opinion in the first place. So if 49% say they lean Republican, there's a shift for the future. Another place where long-term things are shifting. The woke left, the cat ladies, they don't have kids. They have cats. And at this point, the Democrats have not found a way for most cats to vote. Thus, they're not raising voters, but conservatives are. So liberals are replacing at 1.2. So a couple, in order to replace themselves, needs to have a little over 2 kids, because sometimes stuff happens. And liberals are replacing at 1.2. Conservatives are replacing at 1.8. It still means that the U.S. without immigration, hopefully legal immigration, is slowly getting smaller. But that's a huge shift, which means if a kid is raised in a conservative family, they're much more likely to be conservative, even with the indoctrination centers called college. And people are shifting away from college. Another place that is huge, that's a big shift. It used to be, since the 60s, that about 90% of African Americans always voted for the Democratic Party. Now, the problem with that is that in between each election, they ceased to exist. Meaning, the Democrats promised them a bunch of things, but didn't do anything for them. And now, Trump got 8% in 16. I think he got just a hair more in 20. He might get 12 or 15%. That keeps chipping away. But where the most hope is black men. Black men 50 and older, they're pretty much where they were. Roughly 10% of them will vote conservative, vote for Trump. But black men 35 and younger, about 30% of them at this point, and the culture continues to shift, are saying they're going to vote for Trump when we look at surveys. That's huge, because the Democratic Party is this coalition of the oppressed. They make sure that you feel like you're oppressed. They tell you how you can't make it without more government. And if you doubt it, and what they didn't work, it was because we didn't spend enough money and we don't have enough government. They have no other solution, more government. And I think they've moved that so far that it's no longer just kind of a socialist form of democracy. Kamala Harris is talking about price controls. Kamala Harris is talking about giving you $25,000 for first-time home buyers. We're broke. How are we going to do this? How are we going to make this work? A place where there's even more hope is Hispanics. You know, Obama won Hispanics by almost 50 points. Neither John McCain or Romney, both weak, rhino-ish people, they got hardly any votes from Hispanics. Trump won by 6 percentage points in 2020 with Hispanics. And in 2024, it's looking like it's going to be somewhere in that near, and I don't believe the color of your skin should determine how you vote. So there are places where instead of worrying about and freaking out about where everything's going wrong, can you find ways to keep pushing that change, keep moving that message towards something positive? Because I believe that we can recapture our representative republic. I believe that government can work for us rather than we work for government. Get involved, make a difference. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town.